Okay, Assalamu alaikum everybody. Let me share my screen. Can you see it?
Yes, Dr. Simon.
Okay, thank you. Let me welcome you all for today's sessions. Today we are going to learn about PRA tools, that's called participatory tools. There are lots of, okay, let me just make it full screen at the beginning. So it actually takes a lot of time to properly understand everything, but as this is a short training sessions, I will try to be brief as much as possible so that you will get an idea and can, if anyone is interested to use any kind of tool next time, they can do it by themselves just by Googling. So I will simply introduce some tools and then let you figure it out everything for detail as much as you want through Googling. Okay, so the thing is, first of all, in case of participatory thing, first you need to ensure what actually the participation means. In general, when I was an engineer, it was like that. When I used to go to the stakeholders, I used to simply use myself as an information collector. I was simply taking as much as information I could do. But when I came to know about these PRA tools, the first things you need to be, you need to be concerned is if you, whatever participation you want to make sure, is it true or not? So there is like huge sessions on how you actually mingle with the stakeholders, how the true participation you can ensure. So I don't want to go to that arena, but you remember that participations, true participations is the kind of fundamentals for any kind of participatory tools. So what's actually people's know, we want to get the best, analysis out of people's knowledge, because whose research we are doing actually? Can any one of you tell that when we go to the stakeholders, actually whose research we are doing? Is it me doing the research for the sake of stakeholders, or is it the stakeholders research we want to reflect on the analysis? Can anyone help? I guess no one is interested. Okay. Stakeholder research. Khushbu, thank you. Thank you. So the thing is, we are doing research for the sake of the stakeholders, not for ours publication. Huh? That's the main thing. So so ethical things is really important. You won't made up any information coming up from the stakeholders. So what we gonna do is actually the research so that we can get the best reflections out of the stakeholders participations. So there were like history of participatory rural appraisal, then it came to participatory rapid. It was at the beginning, it was, there is a history beyond it. So this is beyond our scope of today's training. So we will simply introduce you to the tools we know. So why we do the PRA tools? Definitely we want to assess something. Then if whatever proposal we are proposing, is it feasible or not? Maybe we want to, we want to understand if that is really welcomed by the stakeholders or not. Maybe that could be a reason. Then there could be like possibilities of development activities, and we want to identify which development activities should get the priority for that particular area or for that particular problem we want to address. So definitely that could there we can use this kind of PRA tools, and as well as if we want to monitor any project activities, or we want to evaluate how the projects end and how it's going on further. So that could be a reason. So there are like many reasons we do use our PRA tools, and the way I said it to make sure whatever project we are taking, or whatever problem we want to address, or whatever solution we were proposing, they should be like participatory. So participatory means you make sure engagement of every stakeholders as much as possible. So these are simply the names of few PRA tools, and we have categorized them in 3 categories. So here you can see the mapping tools only. So I will not go in details the way I say, but you need to remember, I mean, if you need simply take the notes of the name and go and Google, and you will figure it out how it works. I mean, they are self-explanatory, but I will go one by one, just with some few examples, because we want to go to for the exercise. Because the thing is, when you are interested in PRA tools, it is not about just doing some exams at home. It is all about what you do on field, on the site, and how you make sure the participation. So these are simply some examples of the tools, how you can engage the stakeholders and get the best information you want to take and do your research, further research. Okay, so these are the mapping tools: social mapping, resource mapping, transit. There are many more. Then there are some diagramming tools like seasonal calendar. I mean, these are some simply names. And the way I say, you just go, I mean, you see, we have already learned one of them, like problem and solution tree. And these are sometimes be known as cause and effect diagram, because that these are simply, we are presenting the activities and we want to access the stakeholders, engage them, and then simply show their results, or I must say, the show their information through some diagramming, and so that people can easily understand. You know, some people say that picture can tell lots of things rather than simple a report. So people don't want to go through a report, but just by looking at the figures, looking at the diagrams, you will understand what's the situation over there, or the site you want to work with. So, and these are the ranking tools. Why we use the ranking tools? It is the way I say that when there are like lots of options, or when there are like lots of problems, you want to make sure that which are the 5 major problems we want to address. So you need to use at that time these kind of ranking tools. We will be practicing 2 of them on today's session. So the thing is, let me go through one by one so that you will get a bit of understanding what that really means. So when we do the resource mapping, it is obviously, with the name you can understand that there will be a resource. I mean, in any, for say, you want to do it in your village. So it will be like that. You engage lots of, you need to make sure that you arrange a program where most of the stakeholders, not most of them, it doesn't depend on the numbers, but at least you make sure that they are engaged. You are not dictating. You are simply playing as a facilitator. They will do it by themselves. So if they are uneducated, then you will use different tools. If they are educated, then you will use different tools. So there are like lots of directions you will get from the names I just put. So the thing is here, the way you can see that this will be done by the stakeholders, not by us. So what we do actually, this is a case of India, when our student went and do these kinds of resource mapping. So resource mapping, you might sometimes understand that we can easily get it through our maps, or we can get it from Google Earth Engine. Why do we need stakeholders to let us know which river, or where is the forest area, or make a map using their participations? So the reality is like that. There are every tools you use has some specific need assessment. For example, if you want to figure it out, which rivers has really become perennial, seasonal, but it was previously perennial, then they will then give you a map, and then tell you that these are the rivers which are really important to us, but with time this has become seasonal. So I mean, the thing is that these resource maps actually will tell you about what is important to them. Sometimes we also call it like participatory GIS mapping, when you make and ensure that they participated and they take the photos, and then you log them with the GPS location onto the Google Maps, and then it will give you some informations as well. For example, the way I was saying that you cannot get the location of the springs from the map, but if you do the resource mapping with the hilly mountainous areas, they will at that time tell you how many steps it requires to get into the source of that spring, or where actually that spring's coming from. But these kinds of information you cannot find on the map yourself, so you need doing some exercise with the stakeholders who are actually in charge of those springs, or maybe is benefited, or maybe is having a trouble because of the springs. I don't know the research questions you have. So that's why these kinds of resource mapping will be done through the participations of the villagers, maybe. Then also it can be, it doesn't have to be all the time the villagers, but it has to be, the way I said, the stakeholders. You guys know what the stakeholders mean. So this is a map, for example, we have done last month, and it was the intention of this map was like that, what the young people see as the resources in their village. For example, if you can, and there are some notes you can see on the on this map. These notes were taken from the old people. The map was produced by the young people, and the notes were taken from the old people. So you can compare what the old people thinks and what's the difference you find with the young people. For example, young people on to this particular area are more engaged in fish farming or aquaculture, but old people, they were more into agriculture. So it was like that, they prefer agriculture, but young people see the economic benefit are coming more out of aquaculture, so they are more into fishing. So these kinds of maps will actually tell you the story behind a village, or story behind your study site. So this is just a few examples. So these are the resource mapping, and I'm giving you the another one with a village just besides this first village. What's the difference in it? It was done by the women on that particular area who were old. So to old people, what they actually think is valuable to them was were plotted on this resource mapping. So what was the story? It was like that, when you come to a man, sometimes the same resource you won't find important, which is actually important for the young woman. So there are like, the one I was trying to say is like that, for men, more you will see focus on the economic benefit, what fish we are actually producing, or what benefit we are getting from the rice. But when it comes to women, it feels like that they are more into the playing field for the kids, household trees, homestead plants, and then the small ponds they have. So these little resources become so important to the young, old woman, say, or young woman, whatever that is, are different. So resources can have different perspective from different stakeholders. So the notes over here is taken from the young woman, who thinks different from the map produced by this old woman. So this is just the examples of resource mapping I was trying to give you an idea of. And what's the social mapping? The difference between resource mapping and the social mapping, the way I said, it's also a mapping, but it will more focused on the status of the houses, for say where the rich people lives, what livelihoods they have, why, where is the, for example, what kind of settlements or livestock you will have, what is the health status of that families, where is the water logging is a really serious issues and where not. So the difference between social mapping and resource mapping is like that, that resource mapping is sometimes all about the resources you can materialize, But social mapping has both, sometimes has both, but the most thing is like that which you cannot actually, which are intangible, I must say. For the way I was saying that you can, from the map, you can see the houses are there, the rivers are there, but you cannot tell that which river is actually sacred, which house is actually the holy for have more importance in terms of religion, but not the others. That family, not that family, maybe that village is actually ruling the rest of the village people. So these kinds of things you will find in case of social mapping, when it comes to the status of the socials living on that particular area, or the importance of those structures. It can be structures, it can be the health issues. There are lots of things can come out from this social mapping. So this has been done in Nepal with our students under a program. So this is just an example of the thing. So the way I was saying, for example, if you see this particular resource social mapping, you can see the rich people. There is a rich. There are rich, like one household is rich. Middle income households were 14, and poor were 103 households. So they have made different notations for rich house, for poor house, as well as they have pointed out which is a graveyard, which is actually the mosque. Which has the values for them, social, so it has social importance. That's in short I can say. So these were done in, this was done in India with the village people. They like more on ground rather than writing them on the paper. So village people, sometimes you need to understand which are their comfortable tools they want to use, and which where you can ensure maximum participation. So the thing is, then the transact work. After doing the resource mapping or social mapping, you may start with one particular point, and whatever you see as a researcher, it's not about the previous two we have talked, it's all about what stakeholders is actually mapping for you. But transact work will be done by the researcher, talking with the, or getting information from the participants. And how it is done, for example, on the left side you can see the resource mapping, and they have started their journey from the point been indicated by this man, and then he starts to walk. And when he starts to walk, whatever he observed, he will draw it in a line just like this. For example, he has seen, when he started, he has seen a particular kind of trees, because you might find that when I go to like hilly regions, the trees for Bangladesh will not be same for the trees of Nepal, definitely. So what I observe as a researcher, which actually catching my interest, is been plotted on this particular line with what we went through. So the dotted line is actually the lines the man has walked, and whatever information he collected through walking from that particular area, that particular lines have been written up here. For example, is there any fish or not? What kind of livestock he has observed? What kind of crops he has seen so far? So this is called transact work. So it is a more detailing, but without having any basis on resource mapping or social mapping, you cannot do this transact work. You cannot simply start walking and take information like this. So normally as a basis, and resource mapping are used as a basis of your research for transact work. So what is timeline? Timeline, with the name you can really understand. It will give you the history for that particular problem you are dealing with. And the timeline analysis could be done by oral exercise, could be done like, what is where the most important events for them. There is another tool called event analysis. So there is a little bit difference between timeline and event analysis. I will give you a short. So for example, this is a seasonal calendar. What crops they have, what crops have been grown for that particular area. And you can see there is one event has occurred during this part of that 20th October, and that event has affected only this crop, other than doing other damages. So these kinds of information can be clearly understood when you have the calendar over the years, or you can put the timeline and how much actually damage has occurred, or which was more important to them. So this, if you know the livelihood calendar as well, you can better understand which livelihood got most affected for that particular area just through this kind of calendar exercise. So this has also been done by the local people, but we have simply digitized it and now showing you. But this calendar will also be done by the stakeholders. You will not do it. You will simply act as a facilitator. You will ask the stakeholder that which, I mean, from what date they are doing what, and what date is more important to them and for what reasons. So this is simply the showing things. And the way I was saying about the event analysis, it is like most important event. For example, if we consider Nepal, you know, the earthquake year will be the most important event for them. So at that time, you might see, where is the annotation? I cannot see the annotation. So I really find it hard to explain stuff. Okay, let me then go to pointer options. Okay, so it will be like that at that time. If we do the event analysis, screen, pointer, pen. So you might, I could have shown you one pictures we have done last time in Vietnam. It was like that. They will tell you about which crop came in which particular year. And from that on, their agriculture has been shifted from rice cultivation to fish. So this was the year which was had the revolutionary change for the Vietnamese people. And that was the, for example, this is the flood year. The maximum damage has been done for this particular flood. So these kinds of historical events you can, I mean, plot through this kind of event analysis. The significant event will be at that time, will give you an idea that how actually society changed and how the mindset of the society changed from agriculture to my aquaculture, and then what sorts of I mean, the figure was really good. I could have put it here. I don't remember it right away. So it was like that, I mean, the environment has degraded from this year. So you can at that time relate that the effect of aquaculture was not affected them right away, but with time they realized that these kinds of environmental degradations is happening. So when from them they realize the problems and how time it takes to recover the problem, and someone has stopped aquaculture and get back to the agriculture, and from that on you will see that the regenerations had started from this year. So they will plot, they have plotted something like this. So these all informations can be at that time shown through this diagramming. And approaches, the way I was saying, event analysis approaches they will give you the stories. They can be also done by in-depth interview. Why is that? When, how they think, why they think is something like that. So that is the thing. One second, give me a second. Okay. And we all know about the focus group discussions. I'm not going to go details on this focus group discussion, but one thing to remind you all, that sometimes we think just a gathering of some villagers and we'll do whatever we want to do is should not be called focus group discussions. Why is that? Because the fundamental theory behind the focus group discussion is that it has to be a homogeneous group. For example, if you want to do work with farmers, then you will talk all with the farmers only. The fishermen will not come to that group, and there will be different sessions for fishermen. So the focus would be the homogeneous group. And one more thing, sometimes I have seen in Bangladesh that through the FGDs, they do some they bring some numbers and put it on the report. But remember, focus group discussions is a qualitative research. It will give you an hint about what's reality going on, but other than doing the quantitative survey, you cannot say out of focus group discussions some numbers, because it's all about qualitative research. So next sessions we will have, after, I mean, the last sessions we will have on the quantitative research, you will know about the survey and stuff. So that's the most important things I need to remind you all. Otherwise, all the time, our students simply go to the village. They simply start talking with the village people and they think that's a focus group discussion. It is actually not. You have to set a time, you have to set a meeting, and you have to ask the convenient time for them when they can give you the most time, or they will have the, I mean, I must say the ideal when they are actually not busy with their agricultural activities. So for example, you want to do focus group discussions with the farmers, and when you go to the field, you will find most of them working on the field, and you expect that whoever I have got on the village, they are my farmers. So that's not a way it should be done. So this is some figures from focus group discussions and key informant interview. Key informant interview and general interviews, there is a fundamental difference. For example, this has to be a key person. Key person means who is actually can give you the best information. That means, for example, the agricultural officer, the extension officer, the fisherman officer, that can also be the teacher of that particular village. I mean, these can be the key persons, or maybe the political leader for that particular area. They are the key persons for that area. So the difference between when you do interview, you can do the interview with a general woman living on that particular area, but when you say that's a key informant, then you need to make sure that how important he or she is for that particular problem you want to address, and then figure it out why it is a key person. So there's the difference. So the way you can see the picture of the FGD, there, when you take it to the true PRA experts, they will say this cannot be FGD. You know why? Because one, there are too many people, which make it more clumsy, and there are like hierarchy. You can see all the women here are sitting. These are all the students, including me, and there are the men who are standing. So there are clearly, you can see there is a hierarchy of power mapping. I mean, stakeholders' power difference between this and FGD event. So definitely, FGD needs to make sure that all are of have the same status, have the same homogeneous group. So definitely, you cannot tell it a FGD. So similarly, this is the key informant interview. So that's the difference. You just talking with the person will not give you, I mean, sometimes I find my students saying, putting these kinds of picture and say this is an FGD. So this is not. So just for that, I'm just putting it here. So then the institutional mapping. Institutional mapping is nothing, just it's like a Venn diagram. You can see as to make any kind of diagram which actually gives you the idea of the position of different institutions for that particular area. It does not has to be an organization. It can be like the I mean, institutions like I mean, the school. The school can play an important institution, or the panchayat, or the I mean the village, we call it village law. I know the Bengali name of it, but I cannot recall the English name. How can I mean, you guys idea about the panchayat, right? So these kinds of institutions play a really important things, and how important they are for your particular area. This is just a diagram showing it. For example, the left one is the diagram where it's actually showing that which department, Bangladesh Water Development Board, local government engineering department, Ministry of Water Resource, where they belong with that particular water management of that particular area. For example, Ministry of Water Resources lives far away from the local people, right? But their decision influence water board, They are this, and water board plays a really important role in case of water management, making the embankments for that particular area. So they are more have impact on stakeholders rather than the Ministry of Water Resources, but somehow Ministry of Water Resources is linked. So these kinds of diagram will actually give you the idea what I mean, where one kind of organizations or implementer that can be like stakeholders which are important for that area, and how close they are with the local people or local problem. For example, on the right side you can see that these were the stakeholders for my master's thesis, and how different organizations were impacting for particular project. For example, some organizations will have like high positive impact, but some organizations were playing a negative because they were captured by elite. So you will find the community leaders were playing the negative role for that particular sub project. So these kinds of mapping will simply give you an idea and how much I mean which organizations or which institutions actually played positively for that particular reaching target or which is not. So these are simple, and you can also see something like that. I mean, if there are like in between conflicts between different organizations, for example, in case of Dhaka City, you will find there is a conflicting situation arises in between Dhaka City Corporation and the municipality. So these kinds of things, maps will give you an idea that for that particular issue, for example, I am saying, I'm talking about the storm surge, I mean, storm water dealing. Some says we simply do the storm water drainage, and some says we do the sludge tackling. So, but they use the same particular area with the same particular I mean pipe. So that's how the same I mean the issues are same, but the the organizations dealing with the same problem were different, and they are trying to justify their work differently. So these kinds of conflicting things you can also see from the, I mean, if there is any break, no cooperation or no collaborations in between. So these maps can help you out where government needs to work more. This is a mobility mapping. So in case of mobility mapping, it's simple. It's just like that. For example, this is a woman where she collects her water from, and in a day where she goes. These kinds of maps will give you an idea and how much effort she needs to go to where. This is simply a mobility map. The same thing can be done for people migrating to different villages. Where they migrate, are they migrating to different countries? Are they migrating to the neighboring village, or are they migrating to the cities? So these kinds of mobility mapping will help you out to figure it out that. So this is the matrix ranking which we'll be doing today. What the matrix ranking done? If you do recall, in the exercise of past, you have figured out some drivers, all the groups. So if you put all the drivers into these particular columns, and each of the student will figure it out which driver you think playing the most effect on the issues you are working. For example, if I say one group was working on deforestation. So deforestation was an issue for them, and the particular cause they have figured out what were the causes. For example, for say climate change was a reason, and one reason could be like human interventions. I mean, human who are cutting the trees or something like that. So first student thinks human intervention is more important rather than climate change. So what he will do, he might we can scale it from 1 to 10. We can scale it from 1 to 5. Let's say the way I understood, these are scales from 1 to 10. So from 1 to 10, the climate change could be like get 1, and these human interventions got the most impact, so it got 2. So this is the first student what he thinks. The second student, 1 is for 1 people, 2 is for second people, 3rd is for the 3rd person, 4 is for the 4th person. That's how they have done this thing in India by our students, by taking 10 people's 10 villagers information. So what the first villagers thought, he put 3 into that first particular problem and 2 into, so these are different ranking for different person. So here in the group exercise, what we will do, we will put different students view from to different ranking from 1 to 5, and then at the end we will calculate which gets the highest ranking. For example, say it got the 12, it got for example 15, then so on, and then you will rank accordingly, that 15 gets the highest ranking and 12 gets the like third, and say it one get 2, so this is the lowest rank. So when you decide that out of 5 problems or 5 drivers, you got the first as a, I mean the last issue as the most important for that particular village. So this exercise you will be doing in your next sessions. I'm going to leave the sessions in just 2 minutes. So that was the total plan. This was the ranking tool. In case of and these are simply the same examples of those kinds of ranking tools, how things are done. I'm not going in details. And another group will be doing pairwise ranking, the same drivers. In case of first one, you have written the drivers only and taken 10 each participant's view. Here what you will do, all of 10 of you will be talking, and these are the same I mean same problems we are dealing with. For example, the first one is this is the first driver, this is the second drivers, this is the third driver. So 1 2 3 4 5 6, for example, you have pointed out already some drivers during the past exercise, and you will be doing the same for here. 1 2 3, I mean 1 and 1, definitely there is no there you cannot compare these two, 1 and 1, so that's why these are crossed. One and what they do in this particular case, for driver 1 and for driver 2, which you think is the most impacting for that particular issue. For say, I don't know their written language in Nepali, I guess. Yeah, this is Nepali language. So Nepal can help me out what they have written. I don't know. So I'm guessing this is the first driver and second driver, and 10 of the persons think that this is more important in between these two. Then in between 1 and 3, they choose 3. So in between 1 and 2, they choose 1. In between, when they compare, so we are actually eliminating each driver by comparing with each one of them. What's the difference between matrix ranking and pairwise ranking? Sometimes what happens, when you have to take care of like 5 drivers together, and you have to think of the scale in between 1 to 5, people get confused. But it is easy when you compare them one by one. For example, you ask that particular person, which you think is the most affecting driver? Is it the human intervention or is it the climate change? At that time, he can particularly choose one. So that's how you are eliminating one by one and figure it out which particular drivers actually important or affecting most for that particular village, and then you will simply calculate how many of them are there, and you can do the ranking. For example, you can see if I do understand the language, these three, and where else, which has got the most numbers? I don't know.
For an environment.
Which one? I don't know. I mean, I can't read the language, so I really figure it.
Health has got the highest number.
Health has got the highest number. So I'm believing the Nepali friends, health has got the highest number. That means when we do the ranking, health will be the first one that gets impacted by this particular issue. So that's how you will be doing your exercise. One group will do the matrix ranking and one group will do the pairwise ranking with the particular issues you had. So these are simple things, and that's how, I mean, when you are doing participatory research tools and talk about participatory, this is the father of participation. I mean, Robert Chambers, he makes sure that how you can actually make sure participations is a true participations. So you need to recognize that this particular rubber chamber, and if you Google them not Google, if you search with the name of rubber chambers in the YouTube, you will get all the ideas about participatory ruler appraisals and participatory tools, and his sessions, how he actually makes sure the participants or the trainee that how you can make sure the participation in that in an area. So that's why I need to tell you about this reference, that this is the participatory father. And that Kamal Fual was the person who in Nepal who was the promoter for who taught us how we actually can make sure these kinds of participation. So that's it. So today's session, please go to the Miro platform. Each group, Khushbu, you can do the group, divide the groups into different, what we call it in Zoom, I can't recall, different discussion groups.
Breakouts?
Sorry?
Are you saying breakout?
No, you will simply let them discuss and do the exercise on the Miro. So if anyone find any difficulty, then we and let me be the person who can move from one place to another. And one will be Menoka's group, one will be Shudesna's group, one will be my group. So each one will have a mentor. So there's no problem in it. So what we'll be doing, so I need to give you a bit hint. The first thing, the ranking tool I told you about. So after the ranking tool, there is another called Stakeholder Analysis, and it's a vast subject. I will not go further into it, but what we will exercise is the power mapping of that particular exercise. So what we are going to do is going to use this tool after doing the ranking exercise. So you can see my screen, right? Clear and cut, right? Can you see my screen?
Yes, ma'am, we can see it.
Is it the Miro platform you are seeing, or PowerPoint presentation?
PowerPoint presentation, ma'am.
Okay, then it's wrong slides you are seeing right now. Okay, so what we are going to do, if we go to that particular, stop sharing, then sharing the whiteboard. Yeah, can you see the Miro thing right now?
Yes, ma'am.
So team one will be doing the pairwise ranking, and then whatever they will get as the highest rank, for example, say they have gotten the driving force 5th as the highest rank, then they will do the power mapping for that particular driver. For example, if human intervention is the particular driver, or say climate change is the particular driver, let's for the timing say human intervention has got the highest ranking. So what we will do, we will be doing the stakeholder mapping and how that can be done. For example, human interventions, you can say that fisheries department, I don't know which problem you are doing. I'm just taking example as a deforestation. So in case of deforestation, of course, a forest officer. So for a forest department, where he belongs, does he has the highest interest, and highest influence and highest interest? Does he have the low interest or low influence, that kind of thing. So just to give you a bit hint, I gave some clues on that particular area for that particular box. For example, this stakeholder manage everything so correctly. He is the key player of this particular problem. The way I am saying that for deforestation, a forest department will be the key player, because whatever he do will have the direct influence on forestation. So that's how. So but when you come to like local people, you might find, if for your problem, I don't know what your drivers are, if you find that villagers don't do any kind of plantation or anything, but they are affected by it, so they have like what I'm saying, they have like high influence, not high influence, it's the opposite. They have high interest but low influence. Deforestations, if it would be done So it lots of discussion. So you group wise, you will discuss and you will figure it out where one should belong. High interest means that the particular project I'm working on, deforestations, I'm a villager, so I have high interest on deforestation, but I cannot do anything by changing the forest, afforestation. So I will have like low influence at that time. But if you think of like higher department, a Ministry of Forestry, I don't know, Ministry of Forestry, does it have any ministry? Do we have any Ministry of Forestry? I don't know. So in case of Ministry of Forestry, it will have like high influence, but might be low interest. For your village, maybe they don't do any kind of work because your one may be a city. So in case of city, forest department has no influence, might have high influence if it is about deforestation, but has low interest. So these kinds of things you guys will discuss with each other and then fill it up. So what I'm going to share right now, I'm going to give every one of you the editing options, and then you guys can simply do the exercise. Sorry, what's happening? Okay. Can you check the chat box and let me know if you can have the access to it or not? Can you guys enter?
Can you, do you need to have a breakout session?
Yes.
So then you are a host now. You have to.
No. Minika ma'am, I can do now. I think it's
Yeah?
saying now.
Okay, then yeah.
I'll
Okay.
do it. So we have, we'll break the group before only, like Sudeshna ma'am, Sarah ma'am's group.
Yes.
Krishna is not there anymore. Maybe but Fazia ma'am is there.
Okay. So we'll make new group for this or previous group only.
Make the previous group as it is, so it will be easier for you. And in case of Sudeshna's, we will be like one volunteer. For example, Fariha, you know these tools, right?
Yes, ma'am, I know.
So make her leader for this session only, and I can help her out by switching from her.
Okay, ma'am.
Just give them like 10 minutes breakout sessions. We don't have much time. We need to start the next session.
It will take a little time to make the breakout session because I have to check each name. So I do it automatically.
Then no worries. Everyone's go to the Miro platform and do the exercise. Everyone can see who else is doing the Miro platform. And they can do the matrix ranking by themselves because each students have to fill it up, each row. So if that is okay, we can split the team. Let me just take you to the session. So not to worry much. So as you can see, there were like 4 groups.
Yeah.
So for the time being, we will now merging 1 and 2 group to 1, 3 and 4 group to 1 and 2 group to 2, and 3 and 4 group to 4. So we will be doing simply this one. You can see, right?
Yeah.
So write down whatever you want to write down on the top, and each student can fill it up on each row.
So no need to create breakout room for now.
for this work, just do whatever you want, just into split them into 2 groups. Don't worry about that. One group, Mo will be there, and the another group, I'll be there. Just split them into 2 groups. Can anyone write down anything? You can use the sticky notes and then can bring them to here and can write them down. If what you think, is it 1 or 2? I mean, I don't know about the drivers. Everyone is joining in the group, the room 3. What happened to other rooms? Okay, 3 and 4. Okay, fine. So I'm getting,
Okay, is it okay for 3 and 4?
yeah. No worries.
Dr. Sarah, you're muted.
Okay, sorry. Are we all back? I can still see some people's on the breakout rooms. How come? I have closed the room. Khushbu, can you help me out? Can you close the breakout room? Are we all back? I can still see some people. Okay, so I guess most of us are back. Okay, so have you all got the idea how it actually been done?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you, Shumana. The thing is just to give you an idea how the exercise has been done. It is you who were here, but it's supposed to be done by engaging the stakeholders. They will give you the idea that who has the highest influence for that particular area, for that particular issue. It is not us. Okay, so stakeholder diagramming or stakeholder power mapping, this all been done with the engagement of the stakeholders. If there are any conflicting situation arise, the information you need to know that you then have to do series of FGDs with that particular, with each group for that particular area when the conflicting situation you will arise, because stakeholders mapping cannot be done other than doing the stakeholder workshops. Or engaging with the people. So it is most important if any conflicting situation arises at that time, you have to do separately different series of FGDs with series of stakeholders. That's it from my side. I will hand over to the moderator, Menuka. Menuka, are you there? No.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Sarah, so much. Yes, this is the interesting thing for me as well, doing this Miro first time for me myself as well. But yeah, we have a time constraint. So thank you so much. Without wasting any time, so we will move forward to Dr. Fazia Tarun from TERI, one of our collaborator, and then also have a long experience of working in the water sector. So we will welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Dr. Menuka, and thank you, Dr. Sarah, for such an interesting session. It took me some time to actually get the hang of it, but it's a brilliant tool, I think, to engage people, especially, when we are doing it virtually. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon or good evening. I think it's evening for all of us now. And you have been sitting now for more than 2 hours. So probably you all are quite tired as well. And I'm not very sure how amenable you are to really listening to a long presentation, but we will be doing some discussion, I think, through this tool, which the matrix mapping that Sarah was doing. I think the same tool can be applied to the next topic as well, which is on gender and water security. So it's just that how do you really define your problem? So the first thing that I would like to ask all of you, and you can use the chat box, you can unmute and speak up as well, that why do you think that we need to even consider this? Why do we need to look at water security from a gender lens? Anyone can unmute, you can use the chat box, but it would be great if you can unmute and you can speak up. That why have we even kept this topic as part of this training program? Does it really matter? See, water is a problem for everyone. So why do we really need to go and view it from a gendered lens?
I think because, though water is necessary for everyone, but I think it's...
Yes, Khushbu? Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I'll leave this one then. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that because though water is necessary for everyone, but in Nepal, and I think in most of the South Asian countries, even in India and Bangladesh, is woman who is more linked to water, carrying water, walking like 2 hours, 3 hours distance, bringing water to the home, and taking that water is used by everyone in the family, I think, and least by the woman herself. So I think because though water is necessary for everyone, but I think it's women who is dependent more on it because of their household chores, vegetable gardening, agriculture, everything related, and they are the one who carries it often, daily from morning to night. Even in Nepal, I think India also we see many cases of like that also. So I think that is because of that reason, and it affects their both them. It affects their body also, because I have seen there many cases in Nepal where reproductive system is damaged because of carrying water regularly, and mentally also they are, because there's always trauma, that when how to bring water daily. Even in Kathmandu also, I myself had that trauma. Trauma of if tomorrow the water will come or not in our tap. That trauma, that mental trauma is also there. And other than that, I think these are the reasons. These are reasons why we have to look through gender lens while talking about water security and water issues in South Asian countries. I think these are some of the reasons.
Yeah, great. I think, Khushbu, you have given, I think, a pretty comprehensive list of things, because we need to view it from a gendered lens. And I see a lot of it coming in the chat box as well, where people have again reiterated what you spoke about: the water burden, the gendered roles in our society, the physical and mental impact that is there. And water brides also, someone, Chetri, Harikala Chetri has, yes, water brides. So that is something that I'm not covering today in my presentation. But yes, people are having multiple wives. We call them water wives. So not just in Rajasthan, in fact, in Madhya Pradesh and Maharashtra also we have this problem, wherein there are some of the wives are just exclusively meant to carry water. So that is there. But my second question then to all of you would be, so that it makes it very easy for me to run through my presentation then, is gender synonymous with women alone? Because a lot of reasons that you gave and the ones that are emerging in the chat box as well. So so why do we only, the moment the word gender comes, we all start talking about women? So Khushbu, you say no in the chat box, but maybe I would like somebody else to unmute and speak up as to when we talk of gender, why is it that we always talk of women? Anyone?
Actually, ma'am,
Yes,
especially in the South Asian part,
Faria, I think we've lost your voice. Come again. I know you're
can you hear me
traveling.
now?
Yeah, I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay. So, ma'am, in many areas of South Asian region, women are discriminated in many sectors. So that's why they are always considered vulnerable whenever there's this water security issue, or in the water sector, women are always considered as vulnerable.
Okay, good. So often why do we really make it literally, in most of the discussions, even recently I was part of policy making that's happening, gender mainstreaming in foreign policy. So it invariably becomes women mainstreaming in foreign policy, for instance. So then why don't we say that women mainstreaming? Why do we really be diplomatic and say gender mainstreaming if we are looking at women mainstreaming? And we understand that the societies are patriarchal, the policies that are made are claimed to be gender neutral, but they aren't really gender neutral. So we use the word gender for a specific reason. So as I run past my presentation, I will also just cite a few reasons that may not be the only reason that, but maybe you could think of more the moment I start talking about something. But the fact is that we need to think beyond women when it comes to gender mainstreaming, or when we decide to look at water from a gendered lens. Fine. So this one image, what's the messaging that is emerging from this? And this is a very common image that you will see in South Asia, especially, in India, Bangladesh, Nepal. Very common image where you see So today's session, we will understand where do we place gender when it comes to SDGs. We will talk a little about why it matters to consider gender in policy and planning, and of course, in the research that you will carry out as well, to appreciate the difference between gender equality and equity, and to comprehend why it's critical for water security and tools for gender mainstreaming. So I am not going in detail because this is something that is already available in public domain and you can access and see. So when we talk of SDG 6, that is the water, clean water and sanitation for all, it very clearly highlights. So something that we are talking about is actually being acknowledged on global platform, where we say that universal and equitable access to safe and affordable drinking water for all, access to adequate and equitable sanitation and hygiene. Of course, about reducing pollution. So we did talk about in our discussion, I know in the breakout room, somebody was talking about health. So health and well-being, again, is very closely linked to water. So today, this particular topic that we are doing is gender and water, but health and water and gender, they're all also very closely intertwined with each other. Increase water use efficiency across all sectors, and by this also impacts women, or this also impacts all sections of the society, because we will in due course also study how access to water is gendered, how access to water is linked to land rights, how access to water also sort of follows the social stratification that is present in our society. Then implement integrated water resources management. I'm sure all of you who have joined here are familiar with integrated water resources management, wherein we not only look at technical, but we also look at governance, political, social, economic, all four pillars we take into consideration when we are doing water planning. And protect and restore water-related ecosystems, including mountains, forests. So again, protecting this really, in turn, resulting in better standard or better quality of living and well-being of large number of disadvantaged people. And then we have the gender equality goal, which talks about undertake reforms to give women equal rights. Again, you see here, it says goal 5 aims to eliminate all forms of discrimination and violence against women in the public and private spheres, and to undertake reforms to give women equal rights to economic resources and access to ownership of property. So again, here, if you see, even on the global platform, it is acknowledged very, like they have very categorically said that women sort of are in a disadvantaged position. But are women alone in disadvantaged position? We need to, whenever we talk of gender, we need to also look at intersectionality, that there could be women of a particular caste, of a particular socioeconomic background, or of a particular religion, who could be actually having, or who could be at a disadvantage. Likewise, there could be large number of men also who are at a disadvantage, because by virtue of being poor, by virtue of being from a particular caste, by virtue of being of a particular color, that they are actually in a disadvantaged situation. But should we view gender from a binary lens? So as you know, the new age researchers that you are there, most of the studies that you would come across in the past, we will see that we have adopted a binary lens when it comes to viewing gender. But now, henceforth, I think we should definitely look at the third gender as well, because the difficulties or the trauma of the third gender is way more than the trauma of women as well. So let's not ignore them completely, but take them into consideration. So look at gender as a spectrum and not look at gender as binary. It is not always very easy to do that. Often people, that's why in their scope of work, they define that they have adopted a binary lens for viewing this problem. If at all it is possible, try to go for sort of a more holistic approach. Again, the targets, I'm not going in detail, but you can see some aspects I have highlighted in red. but most of it again sort of connects to women. So gender equality, the whole definition, the problem happens, you define a problem comprehensively. So when we talk of gender equality and we only keep talking about women, then there are a large number of people whose problems we are still not considering. Maybe after 2030 agenda, we may decide to consider them. But at this point in time, probably they do not fall in the ambit of my description of the goal. So that is there. Gender roles. So somebody had put in the chat box about gender roles. So I am not, again, closing my screen share and then checking your response. But just look at these words. When we talk of carpenter, what is it that comes? Male, female? What comes to your mind?
Male.
Tailor.
Male.
Shepherd.
Male.
Hunter.
Male.
Chef.
Male.
Mechanic.
Male.
Secretary.
Female.
Yeah, doctor.
Male.
Yeah, sort of both, but yeah, male primarily. Nurse.
Female.
Teacher.
Female.
Female.
Yeah, soldier.
Male.
Police.
Male.
See, it is so clear, it's so evident that how gender roles are being defined in a society. So it's not that secretaries can't be males or women can't be mechanics or women can't be soldiers. Now we do have in the armed forces large number of women. We do have women in police also. Teachers are males as well. But the perception that we carry about gender roles, and probably when you look at these roles also, tailoring again, the moment commercial aspect that gets attached to something. Tailoring at home, most likely, or many of you, even in my house, I've seen my mother, even I also stitch. But when it comes to take it up as a profession, you will generally see males. Cooking at home is done by women, but most of the chefs that you would see, the chef would be male. So many of these roles, while they are being taken up by women as well, but the moment there's monetization of these roles, you will see male dominating. So that's the other difference that emanates from this. Look at this. Look at this picture. This is a program that somebody had done in a village to provide water. So tomorrow when you go and you do your research and then you come up with intervention suggestions, and then there are some interventions which are implemented. And then you have this, you come out with pictures, you post them in different places. These are my project implementation pictures. Now, what is the messaging that is coming out of these project implementation pictures? Any comment on these pictures? No comment?
Men are watching girls filling up the buckets.
Yeah, so it's very evident again, I remember we were doing a USAID project on water and sanitation. It was a three-year long project strengthening water and sanitation in urban setting. And I happened to go with the USAID team to Kolkata in one of the slums for an inspection. And to my surprise, all the paintings that they had done on the wall. So it was like, girl with a broom cleaning the toilet, girl is offering water to the boy. So that's the kind of, so it's not somebody has asked us to, and this we had outsourced to an NGO, which did it for us in Kolkata. But despite that, and that NGO was being led by a female. But this whole thing is so embedded into our system that we don't see men in these roles ourselves also. We feel that, oh, if it's cooking, it's my role. So it's like a self-imposed, self-assumed because of the social construct, because of your, continuous from the day you were born, that thought was put in your mind. So what is the difference between sex and gender? Sex is, of course, biological, but gender is more of social attributes and opportunities associated with being male and female, and relationship between women and men and girls and boys. These attributes, opportunities, and relationships are socially constructed and are learned through socialization processes. The moment a boy and a girl is born, you will see that a lot of pink color dresses are being bought for girls. A boy is born, you generally buy blue and gray and all those colors. So how do you start differentiating between girls and boys? Then it comes to toys. So more of cars and trucks and JCBs and those kind of toys are mechanics, and all those kind of toys are bought for boys. But when it comes to girls, there are dolls and other things. So somewhere, even when it is not being verbalized in our actions, that difference gets created from the day that you are born. But remember, gender does not refer only to women, but it's a point of analysis and part of the broader socio-cultural context of individual, alongside caste, class, poverty level, ethnic group, age, everything. So sometimes women, when like I am at this age, I feel myself very strong. I'm educated, I work, I'm financially independent. I can take my own decisions. I can drive, I can go out, I can work, I do my work myself. I can afford a good healthcare system for myself. But maybe when I age, so age again is again a very big difference. Today I may be very strong, but maybe 20 years down the line, I may just not be as strong. I may be quite vulnerable despite from being from a decent socioeconomic background. So always, being rich doesn't also mean that you are empowered. So all this I have already spoken about, that it's a biological difference. Sex is a biological difference. Gender is a social construction. Socially defined norms of what constitutes to be male or female. For instance, when a boy cries, generally the mothers say, don't cry like a girl. Okay. So, or if a girl is slightly tomboyish and she climbs a tree, they would say, oh, why are you behaving like a boy? So these are these are social norms which are there and sanctioned by a host of institutions. So here the institutions, the roots that are there, the society that makes those rules for us, and it's also located in time and space. It's not like, it would be same everywhere. So there could be a lot of difference in this as well. Quick quiz for all of you, just to get an idea where, how the difference manifests itself in different aspects. So for instance, if it's estimated that 860 million adults around the world cannot read, what proportion of this are women? Quickly, anything? Half. Okay, so it's 2/3 of these are women. Okay, next question. Women own how much of the world's property? Just speak up, because I can't see the chat box. So if you speak up, that's the best thing for me. Anything that you
just raise your hand or just speak up.
10%.
10%, 10%, 1%, 2%, 2%. Yeah. So you can imagine that when we are talking about, so when you go to the research, to the field, when you talk about migration, for instance, and when there are female headed households which are left behind, who have to look after agriculture and other small scale businesses, and they need credit, which is directly linked to having property, women just lose out there. So because only 2% of the women actually have that. In Africa alone, how many hours per year do people spend collecting and carrying water? Okay, let me just quickly go. 40 billion hours they spend per year collecting water. So you can imagine.
Hard to, visualize. We never have seen $1 billion or billion money. Anything.
Yeah, very difficult to visualize, that when we look at India's population itself, it's like 1.3 billion. So when you're looking at billion hours, so many billion hours, you can really imagine that anything between 6 to 8 hours, sometimes they spend just collecting water every day. So that's the kind of drudgery that we are talking about. and we cannot even guarantee clean water. So here I'll just share an experience which I had. I had been to Nairobi for a training program on climate change, and they took us for a field visit to one of the villages. Our bus got stuck, and so there were some children who were playing there. They all came together and they pushed the bus out. So normally, in South Asia, in Nepal, India, Bangladesh, our reaction would be, we should tip them. We should give them some money, right? We should just give them some money because they helped us out of a difficult situation. But the people, the local people, we were carrying those crates of water in our bus. And they said, you please unload a few crates of water, and that would be a much bigger gift for them. And believe you me, they jumped on the water in such a way, and with that happiness on their face that I saw them actually drinking that water, the way our children probably would go for soft drinks or would go for juice or ice cream or anything for that matter. For them, water probably had that kind of value that was there. A clean water was probably so important for them. And these figures I'm also sharing with you just for you to understand that how tough it gets. And when we are in the field, how deep we need to really go in when it comes to data collection, and not just skim, and just come back. That's not going to help the purpose. In the Asian tsunami of 2004, what percentage of the fatalities were women? Again. So this, for any disaster for that matter, for any disaster, it's not just related to this particular tsunami, but for any disaster, when we look at the fatalities, it's always very high for women. It was 80% women who actually were affected. What share of world's wealth is owned by men? Everything is owned by men. Okay, so it's 99% of the wealth is owned by men. What percentage of the men act as heads of delegation to the United Nations climate change negotiations? Again, you have 74%. So look at the representations which are there in different forums. So gender inequality, actually, you can see it at all levels. I was just talking about, and I think in the previous discussion, you did speak about water scarcity and didn't speak about crop failure directly, but it did mean in the breakout room, in the one in which I was there, that water, how important rainfall is there for a farmer. So when you look at climate change impacts, crop failure, how does these impact exacerbate gender inequality? Whether it's food provisioning, whether it's increasing workload, fuel shortage, more time for fuel collection, water scarcity, then again, especially in your Himalayan region, because the springs have started to dry up, then women have to travel longer distance in search of better springs. When we talk of spring rejuvenation program, also we think of having women self-help groups who can actually participate in that. We very seldom think of a more gender balanced groups. Again, there is a reason to that, because many of these things which are voluntary, men do not tend to really work or take up such kind of jobs. I know in India, we have Mahatma Gandhi Rural Employment Guarantee Scheme that is going on, Manrega scheme that we have. So that has got a lot to do with manual labor. And you will see large number of women working in road construction, and even now we have in our watershed program as well. So digging, so all kinds of manual work, because it's lowly paid, it's manual, it's mostly done by women. Now, at least we have that it goes directly into bank account of women, but I'm not too sure. That's something that you need to really explore, that when the money goes into the bank account of women, does it really improve or increase their bargaining position or capability in terms of, or do they have a better fallback mechanism? Or what happens to the money? Who controls that money, even when it goes into the bank account? But earlier, when it was being given like in cash, disbursed in cash, I know for sure a lot of it went to the males who were there. But men would be happy to take up jobs which involves machineries. Like, for instance, Even in agriculture, you will see the sowing, the job of sowing, you will see being done by women, for instance. And there's a very interesting study where men were asked that why is it that the sewing, women do this sewing, it's a back breaking exercise, and they say that they have very flexible back, so they can bend and sew. So look at the reasoning that is there. So when you go to the field, try to find out why is it that tractor is being operated by men? Why is it that women are doing more of the manual work? So try to understand these aspects. Natural disasters, again, the mortality, women's greater, you just saw in tsunami, there's greater mortality of women. Disease, lack of access to healthcare, women's burden as caregivers, So for them, both ways, in terms of, being impacted by a disease, they are more vulnerable, but at the same time, looking after people who are suffering also becomes women's burden. So when there is a disease or an outbreak or an epidemic or pandemic or any of these things, you have seen it in COVID, how it has impacted women, women when it came to not just sort of looking after the family, but also in terms of how their workload increased, how domestic violence increased during pandemic. So what are the referred impacts of many of these things? Displacement, conflict. So we will share these slides, I think, with you, so you can go through it. But you need to also understand, when we talk of environment or environmental awareness, most of their studies reveal that women tend to have higher environmental awareness. We at Terry School of Advanced Studies, so I am a faculty member at Terry School of Advanced Studies, we have an exclusive focus on environment and sustainability, and we have literally it's like 60-40 ratio kind of thing, and sometimes it's even 65-35 or 70-30 ratio, where 70% are women who come to study in our university. So somewhere the pro-environment behavior that is there is more shown by women than men. You will yourself see at the grassroots level in organized NGOs, heads of NGOs which are working at the grassroots level, people who are employed in these NGOs who work with communities, you will yourself see higher proportion of women in these. So that is again linked to the fact that it's this whole domain of environment perhaps is not considered as of now very financially lucrative profession, but that is changing very fast. Now environment, water, sustainability, we have environmental, social and corporate governance, which has become, audit has become mandatory for corporates. So those things are coming up, and I'm sure we will see more representation of all gender types in the environmental domain. I just spoke to you about these things. So gender equality, I don't know why this is coming here. Can it move up? No. How do I move this up? Sorry. Okay, so it's actually gender equality. If you can't see it, I'm trying to move it up, but I'm not able to sort of, okay, let me shift it here. So this is gender equality. What is equality? So we'll just quickly also understand the difference between equality and equity. So equality refers to equal rights, responsibilities, and opportunities of women and men and girls and boys. It does not mean that women and men will become the same, but that their rights, responsibilities, and opportunities will not depend on whether they are born male or female. Very interesting example here I'll share with you. When I was doing a training on gender equity and water management for the ministry here, water ministry. And a question was asked, I asked them, why is it that we hardly have any representation of women? So while women are water collectors, while women manage water at home, but when it comes to policy making, it is all dominated by men. And why is it that? So they said that we don't, when we advertise, we don't say we are hiring men. We just advertise. Very few women apply for positions. So why do very few women apply for those positions? Another question that we need to really look at. Is it because there are less number of women? One is water sector, you know, we view it from a civil engineering lens. So do we have less number of civil engineers who are there? Why should we only hire civil engineers in the water sector? Why should we keep that stringent eligibility criteria that is there? Why are women not taking up civil engineering is also a question that we need to ask. Why don't we have good representation of women in STEM courses? A lot of these questions needs to be asked also, because if we are looking at somewhere trying to do gender mainstreaming or somewhere trying for gender equality, we also have to go for affirmative action. We also have to deliberately try. For instance, I'll tell you, when armed forces in India decided to hire females in army, Navy and Air Force, they categorically came up with advertisements saying that we are hiring females. And there were batches in which they only hired females. Now, the whole objective of that was that since females were never part of that profession, perhaps they always had this little inhibition service. While they had the desire, a little bit of inhibition and fear was there in their mind, that am I suited for this position? Is the profession ready to accept me? When I did my engineering, my college didn't have a toilet for girls. So I'm talking about 80s. My college didn't have a toilet for girls. And believe you me, I had to actually wait for a long break to go to the nearby education department, which had one toilet separately for girls to use it. So that was the kind of situation in which I have studied. So sometimes, you know, the professions aren't ready, but the moment you take this kind of affirmative action, then more number of people start to feel that the profession is ready to hire me. And that's something that we need to also explore and dig out from people when we go. That why is it that women don't drive tractors? Why is it we have water user association in India? We have, I'm not too sure in Bangladesh and Nepal, but we have a government policy under which, you know, every panchayat should have a water user association. There are certain panchayats where they have also categorically mentioned, like in Rajasthan, that there should be representation of women in that. But actually what happens is that when they send them for training programs on machineries, they don't include any women in those training programs. So why is it that they are not? It's a lot to do with culture. But is it that women also don't have that confidence to really assert their position? So at what all levels we need to really work at? You know, for each of these slides, I can just go on and on. So let me just move ahead further. So this is a very brilliant example of I always say that equality and equity. So you look at these three people, there's a difference in height, just as we can say that there is difference in the economic status. There could be difference in their sex. There could be difference in their age. So this is a match that's happening here, a cricket match, and then there is an equal treatment. But is this equal treatment equitable? It's equal, but it's not equitable, because this guy is, of course, at an advantage, but we have the others who are actually, he's barely able to reach there, and this guy cannot see at all. So he's just trying to make the best from these little cracks there. Now this is what we call equitable, but equitable is like at least somebody needs a push, just as I said that in armed forces women needed a push. So the policy was designed in such a way that a lot of women applied, and today they are very comfortable. Today they are even in the combat. They fly fighter aircraft. So that's a little push that you need for things to become equitable. Liberation is something that you actually, this barrier, that little barrier that you have, you remove that barrier as well and make them part of the sort of, you know, all the other viewers who are there. They don't have to watch from outside. And inclusion is, so liberation is, for instance, you know, in discussions on water in villages, we start inviting women to that also. But inclusion would be that their voices are heard and they are sort of considered equal partners in decision making as well. So that becomes your inclusion. So just now what I told you was that equality is not always equitable. So if you want things to be equitable, you may need certain push through policies, certain push through practices, change in practices to actually make equal treatment equitable. This is another very interesting story which all of you must have read on treatment, equal treatment and equitable treatment. The fox and the crane story. So when the fox invited the crane, he served the food in a large flat dish, but the crane could not eat it. And likewise, when the crane invited the fox, he actually served in a long elongated vessel and the fox couldn't drink. So while the treatment was equal, but it was not equitable. So a lot of things, women in development, gender and development, a lot of other approaches were actually brought in. Initially, it was women in development, but then it was felt that probably, you know, this is not being as effective or the way it was meant to be. So they moved on to gender and development, but again, you know, I'm just ignoring that. You can read through that later. And then we move on to gender relations and why it is important. And for you also, when you go to the field, it will become important to understand gender relations. So gender relations refers to how men and women relate to each other, resulting in manifestations of gender-based power. So what are the roles that they are expected to play? Family is a very good example. Men are expected to play a productive role and women are expected to play reproductive role, including caregiving and domestic roles that are there. So power relations are uneven because normally, you know, males have more power in making legally influential decisions. And these roles and relations actually result in creating blueprints for behavior. So obviously, because of this, one party always is at a disadvantage. Why gendered perspective in water resources management? So access to resources is gendered, and by now, I'm sure all of you understand this quite well. Given that extra layer of caste that we have, whenever you sort of have resources, but sometimes people are not able to access it. So it's not always physical scarcity. It's also the scarcity that is created by virtue of social differentiation. For instance, if you have a canal passing through your village, but not everybody would have equal access to water from that canal. So again, the other one is water collection shaped by gender-based division of labor. All of you spoke about women fetching water, how it impacts drudgery of women, how water supply interventions have gendered impacts, dam construction have gender dimension. When displacements happen, how do men and women get affected? Men, women, elderly, children, how do they get impacted? And policy prescription seeks to reduce women's drudgery in water collection, but honestly speaking, they aren't really gender neutral. So, Menuka ma'am, do we have a little time, or I can give this as a task?
Now is a 5:15, Sarah's. Your colleague is already there. If not, we can go ahead with the ma'am.
No, he was supposed to be after 15 minutes. I mean, that's how it's scheduled.
Okay, then ma'am, still we have a 15 minutes then.
Okay, so I am not really going too much on. I'll just quickly share this paper in the, just give me a minute, in the chat box, and just give me a second. Huh? I would request all of you to download and keep it with you. You can read and you can sort of try to look at the questions. Maybe later. You can submit it as an assignment. That would be also great. And we can discuss it tomorrow. Menuka, does that sound good? Rather than delaying it further today?
Yes, ma'am. We have some more minute, but yeah, you can give an assignment, and tomorrow we have a session.
Morning we can in tomorrow's session we can discuss. I can join in the beginning. So
or no, ma'am. Maybe at the end, because at the beginning there is a Karishma from Ishimod, a second session with the Musharraf, but last session with the Sudeshna we can close together. Yeah,
or they can just quickly share it. Ma'am, just give me a minute.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry. So this is one paper that I have shared in the chat box. I would request all of you to read that paper, and perhaps that would really be useful in discussing, because this is shifting the focus from women to gender relations, and it is impacts of drinking water supply intervention in the Morni Shivalik Hills of northwestern India. The questions that we will be looking at are: what are the limitations of conventional indicators of women's water burdens? What new kinds of indicators are needed? Why should policymakers and planners focus on gender relations instead of women? How does this case further our understanding of concept of gender relations? So what I'll do is I'll copy this and I will put it in the chat box as well to help you sort of take down the questions as well. So after you have read the paper, I would suggest to you that you should look at these questions and try to find responses to that. And the subsequent slides actually are around that, the discussion on the questions. So I will skip those slides as well. Just keep in mind, these three things I will tell you, just keep in mind while you are reading the paper, the three levels of indicator. So when we do data collection in the field, we will not just focus on the output level indicator, but we should also look at outcome level indicator and the impact level indicators. Now, what is the difference between output, outcome, and impact? Would anybody like to throw some light on that? When we say output level, outcome level, and impact level indicators, with any example that you think you can explain that? Okay, so let me just give an example from India, and I'm sure similar examples would be there in Bangladesh and Nepal also. So the government of India has recently launched in 2019 when they came back. They started a mission called Jal Jeevan Mission. Okay, so Jal Jeevan Mission is household level tap connections to 14 crore rural households in India. It's going on in full swing. Now, what would be the output level indicators? What would be the outcome level indicators? And what would be the impact level indicators? So for a water project that is there, what is the output level indicator? The output level indicators would be that every house gets a tap connection, right? So anything more you want to add to that output level?
Better to spell out because ma'am cannot have a look in the chat box.
Yeah, so you can speak up. Improved health is impact level. Very good. Greenery developed. No, now I have learned the trick of looking into the chat box also. So every time, you just become a little better. When we plant trees, the number of trees planted is output. Greenery is outcome. Brilliant example, Khushbu. And improved health is impact. Brilliant. So yes, so when we're looking at water, so I'm giving one example. Maybe we could take up an example of springs also, spring shed management programs that the government has launched. So we can take even example of springs as well. So output level indicators are those physical indicators which are there, where if a hand pump is installed, the number of hand pumps installed, that's there. Tap connection, pipelines are being laid down. There are tap connections that are there in every household. So those are output level indicator. Outcome level indicator is that you have water in that. So the water is coming in that's an outcome level indicator. But your outcome level indicator is also if it's a public stand post, or if it's a hand pump that is there, or if it's a spring that has been rejuvenated. So output level indicator would be all the efforts. So if you have dug holes, to recharge the groundwater. So ultimately in springs, the water comes from groundwater. So all the effort that you have put in to recharge the groundwater so that your spring gets rejuvenated, right? So you know what is the source. So you have to map the source from where the water is coming to the spring. And then you have sort of tried to recharge the groundwater to ensure that the spring gets recharged. So that is something that you have already undertaken. So those are your output level indicators. But when the water starts coming in that spring, that's your outcome level indicator. But at the same time, Your outcome level indicators are also who are getting access to water from that spring, or who is able to access water from that spring. Your outcome level indicator is also about if it's a household tap water connection, then how many liters per capita water availability, how many liters of water per person are you able to get? What is the reliability? Are you able to get it every day, or are you still getting once a week? Like in Delhi, in our slums, we have household level tap connections and the government boasts of it, but they get it once a week. So, and the rest of the days they go to public standposts to actually collect water. So these are all outcome level indicators which are there. Outcome level indicators could also be the number of hours that women used to spend, or men used to spend, or whosoever used to spend collecting water. That could also be your outcome level indicator that is there. So outcome level indicators, all these things that we're talking about. Impact level indicator is always a long-term kind of a thing. So impact level, like better health. Somebody said that health, mental health, physical health. So you start seeing improvement in health. You start seeing more enrollment of students in schools. You start seeing more economic engagement in economic activity. So water, when we look at water having a health impact, then sort of, a lot of productive hours gets lost. So is the well-being, overall quality of life and well-being of people improving? The more productivity of like agriculture or crop failure reducing over time, and better quality of living for people. So those are sort of impact level indicators. So when you read this paper, I would suggest to all of you that do keep in mind, the paper highlights it very well, but do keep in mind your output, outcome, and impact level indicator while reading the paper. So I'm just skipping these slides because they're again on the very much on that where we talk about, basic drinking water supply, adequate sanitation, basic hand washing at home. So these things that are available. So what are outcome of what is outcome level indicator, what's impact level indicator, what's output level indicator. We'll just have a quick this thing on mainstreaming gender in water policy and planning. Very important to ask the who question. So water related activities, when you visit the field, list out all the water related activities that are there and ask the who question. So time budgeting is again very important exercise that you do. PRA, I think already Sarah has given you a very detailed understanding of PRA. So who question is very important. Who does what? Okay, so that is very important to understand the treatment of water in the setting in which you are going to carry out the research. So that's why it's important to do a very detailed listing of the tasks related to water. So, and not just tasks, when I say it's not just collecting water, it's not just washing, even decision making related to water, that where a well needs to be dug, or who is going to collect water, get water from the canal, who is not being able to. And somewhere perhaps in this you should also add how much. So how much you should also add reliability to it, that okay, they're getting once a week, every day, once a month. What is the kind of access that they have to water resources? So of course, this is something that mainstreaming gender, the moment we started talking about integrated water resources management, a lot of discussion around mainstreaming gender is there. As of now, the current water policy that we have in India doesn't even talk about gender. It just says women, scheduled caste and scheduled tribes, their needs should be taken into consideration while planning. That's all that our water policy says. We are hoping that the next one that comes will be a more gender sensitive water policy. So that's something that is, at least there is an effort I see towards that. I have gone through the preliminary points that have been there for inclusion. Local institutions also we need to really engender, like Pani Samitis, water user associations. So two very important instruments which are there. Of course, there's not much time to really go in detail. So one instrument that we normally use for mainstreaming gender is gender budgeting. So this process refers to conceiving, planning, approving, executing, monitoring, analyzing. So the whole objective of gender budgeting is, having disaggregated information. So gender should always be one of the elements of analysis. That for instance, when a policy was made that, okay, let's educate the girl child as well, then there was money apportioned for education of girls. How was that money used? Was it really used? How many girls got educated by virtue of that? So how is it that a budget for education, or a budget for water, or a budget for irrigation, agriculture, or augmenting irrigation infrastructure, or a budget for spring shed rejuvenation, how does that translate into benefits for everyone? So that is what actually is about gender budgeting. And that, or when you do it the other way around, that what is the requirement of budget? For instance, when you plan something, when you plan a project, for instance, you budget it out that for manpower, we have a requirement for this much, for the building construction, we need this much, for electricity, this is the requirement, for IT infrastructure, this is the requirement. So likewise for water also, we need to look at that and keeping the benefits in mind. So often these hard infrastructure in which we had been investing, like dams and irrigation projects, probably that in all these years that ended up only benefiting a lot of male farmers who were there, sometimes not everyone as well. So the other thing is gender impact assessment that needs to be done, that whatever they are proposing, for instance, there's a scheme on micro irrigation. How is the access to that scheme? Is everybody getting access to it? What is the mode of access? Is it online? Is it physical? If somebody is not familiar with computer, how does that person access the scheme? So that's again, do a gendered impact assessment of the policy. So will it affect daily life of one or more groups? Are there differences between women and men in this policy area in terms of rights, resources, participation, values, norms? We have to always keep into consideration that if you want to break barriers, then that there are a lot of norms also that we need to actually sort of violate or sort of transcend. And transcending norms and culture isn't a very easy task. So you have to sort of, for a very long time, work with people to really emancipate them, take them out of that vicious cycle. If you really want, the virtuous thing doesn't happen very easily. So with that, I will end. And a lot of things that you see, people make apps for water and then they go and say that this mobile app will help in mapping and monitoring key water points. But that's not my problem. My problem right now is I need water at home in my premise. Or here, these people are saying that these illiterates don't realize what they are doing to the environment. So logging is again, being done by mostly men, but women who are actually just collecting wood, they are being, so nice representation in terms of who is actually monitoring, doing those tasks related to it, their proximity to the natural resources which are there, and who are the people who are into decision making. So custodians of natural resources, you will see for ages women have been custodians. So obviously when they are custodians of natural resources, they do have a lot of knowledge local to that place. But when it comes to decision making, often they are not included. Thank you. With that, I'll stop and I'll take questions if there are any.
Anyone have a question, query, just raise your hand or write in a chat box. Otherwise, ma'am, we will be, she will with us tomorrow at the final session as well.
Yes, I'll be there. Huh?
Yeah.
So it starts, what time, ma'am? It starts at the same time, right? Huh?
No, ma'am. Saturday is at the 2 o'clock. But first session will be the Karishma from Ishimor, second session with the Mosharaf Sir, and third session with the Sudeshna. And you will also, she will have some remaining work assignment also has a given by her, and then also your assignment. So
That's awesome. Huh? That's awesome. So we meet tomorrow then, and I don't want to hold you back. It's evening, and I know you must be craving for a cup of tea. So I don't want to come in between that. If you have any quick question, you can ask. Otherwise, we meet tomorrow after you have read the case study.
Ma'am,
already
just
put-
one question, ma'am.
Yeah.
I don't know if I missed or not. There was this research methodology one body mapping also. I didn't get to know about it. Can you briefly describe about it?
No, I couldn't get it. Huh?
There was also one PRA tool called body mapping in your slides. Can you briefly describe it, or did I miss it?
Which mapping? I know I'm not able to get it.
Body. It was something body mapping.
No, it was in Dr. Sarah presentation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You
Dr. Sarah presented about it.
Okay, I got confused. Okay, ma'am. Fine, ma'am. I'll talk. I'll look into it.
anyone?
Thank you, ma'am.
But if Sarah is around and would like to respond, Sarah.
No, that's fine. Khushbu, I can explain it on the, feedback time, whatever questions we have, because we have our presenters waiting. So it might take 1 or 2 more minutes. So I better skip now, and I will explain it at the end of the session.
Thank you, Dr. Sai.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Lots
Thank
of
you.
your experience, we can really relate it with, doesn't matter in the South Asia or social, cultural experience is same, but with your one experience, we are more understanding a lots of aspect of the gender. With this, we will really like to thank Fazia mom for today. We will again meet with her tomorrow at the final session with the assignment and some remaining question and queries regarding the gender and water. So Sarah, should we proceed for another session?
Okay, thank you, Fauzia ma'am, and thank you, Menoka. And obviously, the way Menoka says, Fauzia ma'am, although I do teach gender, but today I have learned many things, and even me was learning many things. So thanks, ma'am. Okay, we do have our next presenter. That's Professor Mashfiqur Salehin. He is a professor at my institution. It's IWFM at Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. And basically, he is my supervisor. I mean, whatever I have learned so far, be it in water security issues or anything, it came all from him. But I could capture only 1% of his, deliverable stuff. So, sir, without further delay, may I now I want to over the session to you, and if you give a bit introduction on your background, that would be great, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. But I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, that was an extreme, exaggeration of, what you said about me. Okay, so anyways, yeah, I'm glad to be here, and thank you for inviting me. Yeah, my name is Mashfiqur Salehin. I'm a faculty member of the Institute of Water and Flood Management, Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology. So basically, I am a civil engineer. I graduated from BUET back in 1993 from Civil Engineering Department. Then I got my master's in Water Resources Engineering. Then went to USA to get my PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering, principally focusing on water resources, hydrology, and hydraulics. And then I came back to my institute. I had joined BUET in 1994 as a lecturer. Then went to US and came back to rejoin my institute. And then, yeah, and since then I've been here. So my teaching and research career has been a little over 28 years now. The thing is, yeah, I was a very hardcore civil or water resources engineer. I used to do a lot of modeling, lot of technical analysis, technical investigation, kind of focused on monodisciplinary issues related to water resources. But I think towards the end of from mid 2000s, we as an institute started to understand more the the necessity to look at the multiple dimensions of water resources, the need for taking an integrated or holistic view, meaning integrated water resources management. So our whole lens of research and teaching as well has changed since then. So although I'm a hydrologist, surface water and groundwater, I teach both advanced watershed hydrology and groundwater hydraulics with Sarah, of course. But I also used to teach IWRM, taught the course for more than 12 years, I think. And then I also used to teach integrated field research methodology. So the idea is we now understand that the problem that we are dealing with in water resources is not a monodisciplinary issue. There are several dimensions associated with the water resources problem. Of course, technical dimension is there, but the other, social, economic, environmental, ecological, gender, even political dimensions. So those are there. So you cannot just take a single isolated view of water resources. So there comes in the importance of interdisciplinary research and research tools and methods. And so I believe you have already had a fairly good understanding of all the research tools and methods. I mean, normally, we try to frame our research question in an interdisciplinary way, try to come up with an interdisciplinary research question, and then try to define it, or make a list of sub questions that can answer my central research question. And depending on the questions, I select my research tools. And many a times I find that it's not only one particular research method that I'm required to employ in my research, rather it's a combination of research tools and methods I'm required to use. It can be a hydrological model to analyze the rainfall runoff process, the water availability, or changes in runoff, or impacts on flooding, or a drought because of low water availability, so things like that. But how, in turn, these processes or outcome or changes of these processes impact the social or economic or other dimensions. So those are the aspects that constitute our interdisciplinary research questions. So we may very well end up using, of course, some hydrological tool, but a variety of social investigation methods, qualitative research. So I'm sure, I already heard that you have had a session, on qualitative research with Dr. Sarah Noreen. You must have had some sessions on other research tools like use of GIS and others. I saw the program. So how can you use different types of tools to understand and analyze different aspects associated with water security programs? Sorry, water security concerns or issues. So one particular technique that I've been invited by Dr. Sarah Noreen to give a lecture on is quantitative research, meaning questionnaire survey and sampling methods. So I let me clarify it first, in the beginning, that I'm not an expert. Like, I don't do only this, but I use it. We use it as a research tool, as one of many research tools in our interdisciplinary research. So whatever I learned from my interdisciplinary orientation, so for the last 10, 15 years, I'll just try to communicate that to you. And I hope you'll find it useful, but let me tell you again, I'm like, jack of all trades, master of none, but sometimes I think whether it's an insult to someone, or it's something, it means something positive. So basically, what it means for me is I try to understand all the necessary aspects that are needed to understand my water resources issues. And I may not be the most, the expert in that particular field, but have a reasonably fair understanding of the tools and methods. Okay, so let me share my screen. I'm sorry, where am I? Can you see the slides?
Yes, sir, we can see it.
Okay, thank you. So basically, I'll be talking about, I don't know, I already wasted like 5 minutes of my time. So I'll be talking about questionnaire survey, but before that comes the sampling. How do we sample from my population? So we'll try to understand what we mean by sampling and why we need sampling. Different methods of sampling, and when and how we can apply different types of methods. So we need to understand, learn a few statistical important terms like population. A population is basically a set which includes all measurements of interest to a researcher. For example, if I want to study water security issues in the coastal areas of Bangladesh, in different geographical areas, of course, the vulnerable households, the total number of people or total number of households that exist in the coast, for example, southwest coastal area, will constitute my population, but that will be like thousands, thousands and thousands of tens of thousands of households in that area. So I cannot just go around, go and ask around all the households, in my questionnaire survey. So I do need to take a subset of that population, which is my sample, keeping in mind that I will need to, the sample needs to be representative of my population, meaning it needs to present the essential characteristics, the important characteristics the population has, without losing, important aspects. So that is a criteria. And then it's also needs to be accurate as much as possible, and that depends on the sampling methodology that I have chosen, and also the sample size. So whether it's a small sample which may not be representative, or whether it's a sufficiently large sample that I can accommodate within my budget and time. So so this is very important. And then sampling element is basically the unit of analysis in a population. So it can be a person, a household, a group of people, or an organization. So these are my basic units, the sampling elements, basic elements for. And then sampling unit means the smallest unit from which I take my samples from. So for example, if I say I'm studying like 100 unions or sub-districts in my coastal area, and then from each union I sample my households, then this union will be the unions will be my sampling unit. So there can be sampling unit different levels at different levels. So it can be at division level, it can be at district level, or even household level. So so these what we call the unit. And sampling frame is basically the list from which we select our respondents from. So it can be a list of households that we can get maybe in a census, or from a voter list, or if we are doing a study in some university. So we may want to use the list of all students that is available at the registrar's office, and so on. So basically it's a list of all my respondents in the questionnaire survey. So if you look at this particular diagram, so it's clear that the sampling elements, they are not the same, right? So they have different attributes or different characteristics. So here I see black, blue, green, and red dots, and then some of them are thin, and of course some of them are bold, and many of them are smiling while some of them are sad. So it's a mix of different characteristics you'd find in your population. So how would you sample? What will your sample look like? And that will depend on, so what you are basically questioning. What is your research question? And then accordingly, how you are selecting your sampling method. So that becomes important. But it's very important to first identify, have a list of your sampling elements, basically your sampling frame, and then also the characteristics associated with the sampling elements. So there are different types of sampling methods. Principally they are categorized into two types: a non-probability sampling and probability sampling. So I'll try to quickly go one by one. But basically, I mean, ideally for a quantitative survey to be representative or to be used in an acceptable way, we'd like to do some probability sampling of our respondents, so that they can represent our population as accurately, as accurately as possible, with the essential, with the manifestation of the essential characteristics. So that, that would be the target of doing, some formal questionnaire, probability sampling. But in other cases, for some particular reasons, we may have to go for non-probability sampling. So it's maybe important to understand the differences between these two major categories of sampling. So among the non-probability sampling, first of all, this means that so that the probability of being chosen is just one second. It is not known. So so basically we are not following any technique that conforms to our probability theory. So while in probability sampling, so we make sure that each of the samples or respondents in our questionnaire survey has an equal probability of being chosen. I just assume that you have some fundamental understanding of probability and statistical theory. So so that would be my assumption anyway. So the first non-probability sampling methods. So several terms have been used by different researchers to basically mean the same thing: accidental sampling or haphazard sampling, or convenience, or grab sampling, or opportunity sampling. So basically, so you collect your information from anyone you see while you are out in the field, in a particular place. It can be a road, along a road, or in a marketplace, or in a bus station, depending on what you are doing. So for example, say you are surveying, your research focuses on what type of customers go to a particular shopping center, and you try to understand their satisfaction of a particular product or so on. So you can just go to the shopping center, stay at the gate and ask people who go in and or maybe who come out. So that kind of survey is basically what we call accidental survey, or about grab sampling or convenience sampling. So it's very easy to get access to your respondents, but you cannot really make any generalizations about your population. So it will be difficult to make any strong inference. So for example, this kind of sampling may not be very useful for your water security studies, but maybe very useful for pilot testing of your questionnaire, right? So yeah, you are doing some conventional questionnaire survey. So you have developed your questionnaire. So yeah, you are basically going to get your questionnaire tested. So in terms of the validity of your questions, whether those questions are useful or people will be able to answer those questions, and that the length of your questionnaire survey, how long it will take, so and the level of difficulty of different questions. So those kind of things that you'd want to test before you go for your formal questionnaire survey. So in that case, it's a priority that you do your pilot testing. So then, that those would be your convenience or or opportunity sampling. Judgment or purposive sampling. So here, basically you choose your samples purposively because the group of people who would be useful for you and who you think would be able to answer your questions more correctly or more efficiently. So basically, these will be limited to those people who have expertise in the area that you are researching. So for example, you are interested in learning about students who are at the top of your class. If you're a university teacher, so then basically you'll select those, say, top 5% of your class, and then ask those you basically select those two students. So this is one example of purposive sampling. And then one non-probability sampling, which is very similar to a probability sampling method, the stratified random sampling method. So we'll come to that. So this is called quota sampling. So you can imagine, so your population, so as I said before, will have different types of characteristics. You can categorize them in terms of their gender, sex, male or female, in terms of their place of residence, religion, so whether they're Muslims, Hindus, or Christians, education level, so how many of them are graduates, how many of them have had primary education, and so on. So you can segment or categorize them into these mutually exclusive subgroups, and then you can sample or select your respondents based on a specified proportion. So for example, you have specified that, okay, I'll select like 40% from these male subgroup and 60% from this female subgroup. And when you select them, and then you just basically sample the males or the females that you think would be more able to answer your question. So you are not using any random sampling method to identify those respondents. So I think these are, this is more commonly found in non-probability sampling, the quota sampling. So not always I've seen people use, random method to select their samples, but once you do it, you should be very clear about your methodology. So this can be used in many studies. For example, For example, so you are studying water security aspects. For example, you want to see the difference between how water security or what water is, I mean, decisions related to water security differs between male-dominated households or female-dominated households, or and how they try to mitigate those negative impacts differently. So in that case, this kind of quota sampling would be very useful for you to do. And of course, it would be always better to go for random stratified sampling to make it more representative of your population, and to enable you to do some statistical analysis, which would give you much better understanding of processes or relationships between different variables. So that would be one example of quota sampling. And snowball sampling, so this is another non-probability sampling method. So basically you start with, this is also referred to as chain referral sampling method. So you basically select a primary data source, maybe one person, and then you would ask that person, okay, I would want to interview another person like you who has had similar experience, who has experienced that particular thing similarly as you have experienced. So can you suggest one name or a few names, and then you ask, basically you repeat. Your sampling goes on, just like a snowball grows in size. So, and in your case, as the snowball grows in size, your sampling size also grows in size. So, and you continue this process till you get enough data to analyze, for your analysis, and for you to make, strong inferences, conclusions from your analysis. So, so can someone tell me, so does this kind of method has any potential application in water security studies?
If anyone find any problem while talking, you can always leave your message in the chat box, because sometimes our network is really poor, especially in Nepal.
Okay. So basically what I said was, so is snowball sampling, will it be useful ever for any studies in relation to water insecurity? Can you think of any aspects of water security issues where you can use this? You basically start with, for example, an aggrieved person, or a person who has been, for example, abused, or
yeah, we have got message in the chat box. Some says it's better for gathering social information, like uses of water.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Uses of water, I think it's in that case, it would be better to go for other simple random sampling or stratified random sampling, depending on your research question, of course. But for example, normally, say you are studying, you're trying to understand the status of some aggrieved persons, for example, some violence or some abuse, domestic abuse or something. So, it's very difficult to get to identify or to get a list of people, list of your population where you can get your sample from. So in that case, of your primary data source, one person, and then you ask him or her, your questions, and then you ask him or her. So who would be the other person to talk to, and get ideas, get more information about the same. So so I think you can try to find out. So there are a lot of conflicts, a lot of abuses or gender violences. So in water security, aspects that I have seen, of course, in coastal Bangladesh. So maybe in some aspects, this snowball sampling may be useful to get an idea, to get an idea about the depth of the problem, the extent of the problem. So, and also the inner story of the problem. So in that case, it may be useful. About the probability sampling, as I said before, probability sample is one, but each element of the population has a non-zero probability of selection, meaning so they have an equal probability of being selected. So how do you ensure that? So in simple random sampling, so for example, these are your sampling elements in your population. How do you sample them? Using a random sampling process. So very simply, for example, so you are working in a district and it has like or a union and it has 5,000 households. If you have a list of households and some labels associated with each household, so you can put all those numbers, all those the names of all those households in a hat, and then you can randomly choose from the hat. For example, the first 100 households that you select, take from that hat would be your sample. So that would be your random sampling, meaning that each of your sample will have the same probability of being selected in the process. So, I mean, of course, you won't do that, right? So that would not be a convenient way to do this random sampling. Another way would be to have, for example, say you have a directory, which with a list of all your samples in the population, all your sampling elements in your population. And then how do you do it? I don't know whether you're familiar with random data generation. So you can use the random number table, for example, a table like this, and then so using this you can select, like you can start from the first, and then you can select the sixth element, then then the eighth element from the sixth, and so on. So that would be your simple random sampling. But you can imagine, so this will be very long and a tedious process. And these random number tables, although once popularly, commonly used long time back. But for big, fairly large questionnaire survey, so these are rarely used these days. And so, is there a question? Okay. Yes, that is a good observation. So whether snowball sampling would be useful to gather information of violence from one attempt or in a group as well. Yeah. So yes. You can think about which method would be more useful. Of course, the qualitative methods like the focus group discussions and others, or individual interviews. They could be more useful. So basically, the message that I was trying to convey is when you don't know your population, you don't know really who your aggrieved persons people are. So this would be one way to get the information, who those people are, and then you can go, uh, you can increase your sampling size, right? So you can go from one sample to another. So, or you can more or less identify a group of samples, and then you can use any of your sampling methodology to make a sample from your population. So it may give you an idea of your samples in a population where you have absolutely, or you have very little idea who those people are. So it will be very difficult to even do a population survey or a quick, what we call households quick numbering with some characteristics. It will be very difficult. Yeah. Okay. So this kind of use of random number table would be applicable when your population would be small, homogeneous and readily available. So that is okay. But many times it would be very difficult. But especially when the sampling frame becomes large, so this becomes impractical. So systematic random sampling. This is useful. I mean, this is an advantage over the pure random sampling. So in this case, so your population, so you arrange your population in some order and scheme. For example, you have already have a list in your, for example, a voter list or a telephone, phone directory. So so what you basically do is you select randomly. You select your first element randomly, and then for example, you select your 8th. So this is your first element, and then you decide that you'll sample every 10th element from this list. So your sample would be this 8th element, and then this 18th and 28th and 38th and so on. So so the thing is, so when you first select your first element, that also needs to be based on random sampling. So then how do you do it? So you basically then select the same process that I had just described. So you can use you can put them in a hat and select so for example, you select like 31, the numbers from 1 to 30, and then you randomly pick one number and start from there. Or you can use a random data generator and use it use the first number that comes in that random randomly generated data. So once you fix your first element, and then you you continue with your pre-selected intervals. For example, that could be every 10th element, or every 20th element, and so on. So so this would be just an example. So for example, if you start from the 10th, so all these will be your samples. If you had if you start with your 8th sample, so and your interval is 10th, so this column, so this will represent your samples. Okay, so so this is basically you are doing the same random sampling, but in a systematic way. So this is the difference between a systematic random sampling and a pure random sampling. So what would be some useful examples? For example, so you are basically interested in, you are working in a peri-urban area. So you know that mostly in a peri-urban area, that the development of roads or newly constructed roads, that is a major driver for the peri-urbanization process, the emergence of or in-migration of people, emergence of new entities like new industries, new commercial use, of water. So so road is one important driver for peri-urbanization. Of course, there are some other drivers as well. So you want to study the impact of peri-urbanization and how peri-urbanization is changing, evolving with time. So you want to survey the households, that are there along a particular road. So you can just, then it becomes a little easy for you. You can get a list of households along those roads, and you can do your systematic random sampling. You can take, for example, start with the third or fourth or fifth households, from the starting point, and then you can sample any fifth or 10th or 15th or 20th or whatever, at a regular sampling interval, and you can select your samples. Or you can do the same, among the voters who are in a queue at a polling station. It depends on your research question. Quality of water along a river. So you want to understand how different groups of people are differently impacted by degraded water quality or compromised water quality along a river. So in that case, you can also use a systematic random sampling. You can also, draw some, some line, make a list of households in your population, in a particular village, and then you can again use the same way to do your systematic random sampling. You say you are in a movie theater, you are an owner of a movie theater, trying to understand the satisfaction of the moviegoers of the renovations that you have made. So what do you do? So different people, would come to your movie theater at different times, but you can still do some systematic random sampling. You can decide that, okay, I will interview every fourth person that comes into my movie theater, and ask him or her about his or her satisfaction of the new renovations that I've made. So there would be there could be different types of examples why you can use the systematic random sampling method. So they have a number of advantages, of course, very simple. Most importantly, you can produce the sampling frame rather easily, but disadvantage is, if there is some hidden periodicity, right? So so that would be very difficult to identify though, but so that could be a remote possibility, maybe a hidden periodicity in this list of population may obscure the research questions that you have. Then very useful, the stratified random sampling, and very frequently used in water resources study. So as I said before, it's similar to the quota sampling that I discussed before, but with the difference that here you are getting your samples based on a random sampling method. So your population or your sampling elements have different characteristics. So you divide your population in groups that differ in different ways. So this group has sort of some similar characteristics, and they have some different characteristics, and so on. And then so once you divide your population in this this kind of strata, and then you do your sampling from each strata. So so these strata can be this stratification can be based on, again, your gender or sex, like male or female, religion, education level, place of residence, or different, for example, different livelihood groups, farmers, fishermen, and wage laborers, basically landless people. So different types of livelihoods. So you can they can form different stratas in your population. So once you have stratified your population, it will be easy for you to sample from these strata. So basically, this is useful. For example, the example that I've given before. So again, if you want to understand how different people or different livelihood groups, suffer from water insecurity problems differently in different geographical contexts. For example, so the farmers and the fishermen. So when there is water security problems, be it in terms of water availability or water quality, or the impact of hazards or disasters, they will be impacted differently. That we understand. So but we still want to understand how the farmers, to what extent they get impacted, and what kind of mitigation strategies they usually take, and what coping or adaptation strategies they would take in a particular context, social ecological context, and how differently the other livelihood groups would react, because of those water insecurity concerns and issues. So that you want to capture. So in that case, of course, your stratification would be your livelihood. So based on your livelihood activities, livelihood activities of different types, groups of people. So if you can, stratify your sampling elements based on that, and then you do your sampling from each strata. So this is very frequently used in water resources study. So, and they have many advantages and a few disadvantages, of course, but the main advantages, the simple random or systematic sampling that we have just seen, they do not guarantee a representative sample has been picked up. So, for example, some minority groups or some people of some strata, may get missed out. They may miss out from the sample, but that will not be a problem for stratified random sampling. And it's not, it usually will give you increased precision in your estimation. And and importantly, as I just said, all strata. So since you are, you have tried your best to capture all the strata, so and to ensure a proportionate representation in your samples. So, but one disadvantage would be to produce to prepare the sampling frame of the entire population. So you need to have a list of your population. It can be for a particular division or for a particular district, for a particular union. Or if it's a big survey, it can be for the entire country, whatever. But then, so you need to have those information on those characteristics as well, which are based on your if livelihood is your strata, then you must have some information. Adequate information on livelihoods, as for those populations. So normally we get from census data or from some other survey data from secondary information. We normally get some useful information that we can use in preparing our sampling frame, or we can still go out and do some primary survey to update our population list and make sure that the sampling frame represents it gives a good picture of our population. And random cluster sampling, it's the way it differs from stratified sampling is here. So you are dividing your population into groups, usually different geographic or organizational groups, and then you select the groups randomly. So when you're dividing your groups into, dividing your population into groups, which we are calling cluster here. So those clusters are usually, regions, districts, or villages. And and they're mutually exclusive. So no element would belong to more than one cluster. For example, if for the case of Bangladesh, it could be, so these are these are the districts in the northwest region, maybe north central and northeast region, southwest, south central and southeast region, and so on. So you can divide your population into these geographical clusters, and then from each cluster you can select your samples. This cluster sampling can be done in several stages. For example, in a single stage, so you basically sample your clusters. You have all the list, so this is your cluster, this is your cluster. You basically sample your cluster. So for example, you sample your district, and whatever population is there, you interview everybody. So this would be your single stage, not much used anyway, but it could be also two-stage, cluster sampling. So from these clusters, so from this cluster, so you select your cluster, and then from the clusters you select your samples. So it can be done in two stages. Or it can be also done in multiple stages. For example, so first basically, so you are grouping your population into, say, districts, and then you are basically selecting the districts which have the highest population, that you're interested in, the highest density of of population. And then you are interested in those highest density of people with extreme poverty. So and then so you have this, selected those people, and then you do your sample, from those clusters. So in that case, it would be called a multi-stage cluster sample. So these are all useful. It's very easy to get confused with hearing all these methodologies, but once you get to work with these methods, it will become clearer with time. So that I can assure you. So the issues with random cluster sampling is, so if your clusters are similar to each other, for example here, so if your clusters are similar to each other, then your error would be minimal, would be small, because you'll not be missing important important characteristics of your population. But if your clusters are not very similar, and they're very dissimilar, in clearly, in number of aspects, then your error would be very high. And in this particular case, what you would want to do is go for stratified cluster sampling. So if your clusters are like this, so and with not much differences in their characteristics, then your error would be smaller. You can still, you'd still want to use random cluster sampling. But here in this particular case, so you'd want to go for, of course, you'll still call it cluster sampling, but it would be stratified cluster sampling in that. Now, so this is your entire, so the same thing here. So this is your these are your clusters. So and you basically have grouped them, in accordance with an, a strata. So, and that will of course depend on your question. So it can be male or female, or as I said, different livelihood groups, or different religion or education level, or so on. or even, vulnerability, high, low, or medium, vulnerability to different hazards and so on. So when you have all these strata, so your first step would be you combine your elements, of stratification and you cluster them. So now you have defined your clusters and you have grouped your clusters into a strata. So, for example, so you have grouped all the all the elements here into clusters, and then also did the same for here and same for here and same for here, and then you basically group the similar clusters like this. Yeah, I mean, so you group the similar clusters into strata of clusters. So you have put different clusters here, group them here, and group them here and here and here. So now you have basically representation from everywhere, and then basically you do your cluster sampling. So you have stratified your clusters, and then you are sampling from your clusters. Then you sample some from here, some from some here, from some here, and from some here. So this is also very widely used in water resources studies. For example, in Nepal, since mostly I'm familiar with Bangladesh. So in the coastal area of Bangladesh, I am doing a water security study, a questionnaire survey in the southwest coastal region. So there are about, I'm trying to remember how many districts, a lot of districts there, 63 or 64 districts maybe. And but in the extreme south, I have 19 districts. So, but in those 19 districts, I have something like 623 unions. So, or rather upozilas, I'm sorry, unions. So I have all those. If I can define those unions into some strata, for example, based on my the vulnerability to physical vulnerability to hazards, and then I can group them, and then I can sample from them. So then that would be my stratified cluster sampling. Sorry. Okay. So so this is all about sampling. So depending on your research question, and then the way you want to look at impacts of different groups of people, meaning different strata. So you'll choose your sampling methodology. So what I find that many times you'll want to use systematic random sampling, or at least stratified sampling. These are very common in water resources studies. Another important, Sarah, how long do I have?
Sir, it is like I mean the program's supposed to end now, but
okay, I'll take five.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
I'll take like for maybe 5 more minutes. So about the sampling size, sample size. So of course, there is some important aspects of what should a sample size be. For example, as I said, it should be able to represent the population. So it should be sufficiently large to represent the diverse population. But then it cannot be a very large sample that we cannot accommodate with the time and money that we have. So there's always this trade-off, but we cannot really compromise with much with our the required accuracy of our analysis, the very objective that we started the research with. So sampling design is very important. So and unless you have a fairly large or representative sample, it will be very difficult to basically convince people of your results, especially when you do your inferential statistics and try to come up with different relationships among the between and among different variables. So if you have a good sample size, representative sample size and a good sampling methodology, then it will be very useful to convince people of your results. So your sample size would of course be depend on the population size and its characteristics, the homogeneity or heterogeneity. So if it's homogeneous, so you can imagine your sample size would be less. If it's heterogeneous, meaning that you have to then capture the diversity among your population, and obviously your sample size increases, of course it will also depend on the objective of your research. The thing is, the sample size is not linearly related to your population size. So if your population is small, so your sample size can be as almost equal to your population. If it's your population size is very small, but as your size of your population increases, sample size also increases, but it doesn't increase linearly. So you can see from this table. So for example, for a population of 2,000, you may need a sample of 745, while for a population of 50,000, you may need a sample of 1160. So your sampling ratio goes down with the increase of your sampling size. So it's all about statistics. Basically you want to retain the statistical properties of the population in your sample size. So this is what you do. So there are different ways, different formula that you can use. I am just giving you one example here. So as I said, you want to ensure that your sample represents or leads to as less error as possible, as minimum error as possible. So some statistical analysis would help you to ensure that. So you want to decrease your error, you want to increase your confidence interval. So you want to make sure that you are working at 95% or 99% confidence interval, or in other words, the errors, to what extent they are significant or not. So these will be your determinants. So some formulas are there, of course, and if you're familiar with this, I don't have to explain all this. But what you can do is you can use this kind of formula where so there are some information that are needed. So the margin of error. So what margin of error is acceptable to you? So you can consult your probability table in a Gaussian table, and then choose your margin of error, and then that information you can use to calculate your sample size. But again, so there is one variable, the variance of population, that is kind of unknown to you, but there are different ways you can get an estimate or guesstimate of your variance required for this sample size, for determining your sample size. But there are other maybe simpler ways to also determine the sample size. So you may want to choose 1 or 2 or 3 methods and then compare them. And there are some adjustments frequently required. So I'll not go into details, but I'll just introduce you to a number of different types of survey that frequently you see people do for different purposes. Could be cross-sectional surveys. You collect information from the sample at the same point of time. That is all. Basically what we do in our research. So we are doing a sampling, out of the population of, for example, our southwest coastal region, and we are doing this survey taking a 1 month's time. So basically, what we are essentially saying is we're doing a cross-sectional survey, doing the sampling at the same point in time. But then, so you can do your longitudinal surveys. So meaning, you're repeating your surveys, at different points in time. in order to see that, how changes are taking place, so you may be interested in looking at some seasonality in water insecurity among the same group of people. You can look at the trends, or you can do some cohorts, study, meaning, I mean, in this, for example, trend study, so your population, members of the population can change if you want to see the trends. But I mean, so, but in again, the cohort study, so basically you are interested in to see, I mean, to basically study your samples who share some common characteristics, for example, some particular occupation or livelihood groups or some demographic similarities, and you want to understand the changes that they experience over a period of time, and that could be many years. So those would be called cohort study. But the panel study is, you will always survey the same group of people, and basically track down the changes they experience with time, which maybe as an outcome of the environmental change, or human or anthropogenic pressures. So I really don't have time to talk about questionnaire survey, but I do have the some useful slides if you are interested. So how questionnaires can be structured, and what different types of questions can be formed in a questionnaire survey, how we frequently use closed-ended questions in a formal questionnaire survey, I mean, mostly leaving out open-ended questions, and how we can use different different types of scales of measurement, meaning how we label different types of data. For example, for some variables, so we basically use some labels to identify those. For example, one for male, two for female, some preferences, and so on. So these numbers do not mean anything, but they are basically the identifier for those characteristics. But then there could be some other scale, like ordinal, what we call ordinal scale. I mean, where you basically rank your answers. For example, you will frequently see these kind of options given in your questionnaire: very unsatisfied, unsatisfied, neutral, to very satisfied. So here, so you skills use some kind of scale, maybe a Likert scale from 1 to 5, and then so these what we call ordinal scale. These are useful because when you so this is part of your coding your data. So when you after you are done with your survey, and when you transfer everything back to your software, so then it gives you a very good advantage to deal with your data, to analyze your data. So there are some other scales as well, interval scale. So these will be now, I think, kind of self-explanatory to you. So if you have a look at the slides, so and some ratio scales. So these kind of questions you frequently come across in a questionnaire survey. And then how you construct your questionnaire. So I think that those will also be self-explanatory to you, and the question content and how you word your questions. How you, there are some rules. Some thumb rules. What you can do in your question, in your questionnaire, what you cannot do. You cannot use biased, you cannot use leading questions. You cannot, drive your respondents in one particular direction. So you want to make it as flexible as possible, as for them to choose, to be able to to be free as much as possible to choose a particular answer from the given choices. So yeah, so this is what I wanted to talk about, and this was going to be my final slide. So once you have done your survey, then you do your data analysis. If you have if you have framed your questions, keeping in mind the important, the variables, the variables associated with your questions and how they, you must have your hypothesis or conceptual framework, and you want to frame your questions in an intelligent way so that you can do some inferential statistics later on, present your data in an intelligent way, and form some statistical relationships where, and if those relationships are statistically significant or not. So there are different ways you can do it, and there are different softwares like SPSS or Stata, so you can use. So yeah, so this is okay. So I stop there, Sarah.
Thank you, sir. It's really, I mean, difficult to end everything in 1 hour. That's, I mean, there are so many things to cover, and but luckily, I hope that by just with your slides, they can actually can see the details, and then rest of the things can be Googled, I guess. Okay. So if anyone has any question, please feel free to ask. What is the software did you say at the last regarding data analysis? Kobo? Is that
No, SPSS. That would be
SPS?
one. Strata would be another one. So these are frequently used by people. Of course, there are some softwares. It used to be paper, paper questionnaire survey before, right? Based on paper, but these days we don't use papers anymore. Of course, some people still do, but it's now very convenient to use some software. Sarah mentioned one. Some interface where you can program your questions in a way that when you can check your data in real time. So when your enumerators are collecting the data and putting in your software in a tab, and the data gets immediately transferred to you, you can check your data, and if anything goes wrong, so you can readily detect it, and you can redo, or you can take care of that, and you can transfer those data in a very useful format, friendly format, to either SPSS or Stata for your subsequent analysis. So that is, that now becomes an important component of your questionnaire survey. So that is the task of perhaps a data manager, so who has a very good skill in design, basically customizing your questionnaire that you have developed into a software-based, tab-based questionnaire. And then you conduct your survey and you get your required information.
Okay, so sir, nowadays people use Google Forms. Is it really, okay to use for questionnaire surveys?
I'm not familiar with that, but Google Forms, basically you need an digital platform, so where you can structure your data. It's basically a database, right? So you can structure your data, and then you can transfer your data to this kind of software. You can transfer the data to even a spreadsheet, right? Excel, and you can do some basic, basic analysis, cross-tabular analysis and so on. So so there are different options available with those softwares. Yeah, so I'm not familiar with, I'm not too sure about Google Forms, so whether people have found it useful or not. Yes, for inferential data analysis, so of course, these two are what, they are for this inferential data analysis, the SPS and Stata. So you can do all kinds of, some I mentioned here. Maybe you can do all this, frequency, correlation regression, multiple regression, multivariate analysis, so you can do all these, using those softwares. But I will tell you one thing, of course, for us, the researchers, it's we should try to avoid, using tools as black box. So, for example, I'm also a modeler. I have my own model, hydrological model, and I do groundwater modeling as well. But what I tell myself and also tell my students that it should not be use any tools or our models as black box, meaning I don't know what is happening inside, right? So if you are using these, softwares, please try to have some basic, statistical, familiarity with statistical analysis. What we understand by inferential statistics, how we do, form relationships between different types of variables, and explain those relationships with different types of statistical tests. There are many, like chi-square tests, t-tests, regression and others. So I have some basic idea, and that will help you, when you do your inferential statistics.
Thank you, sir. We could have run this for a few minutes, but we are already 15 minutes late.
Yes, one final comment in 30 seconds. So although the lecture, has been on questionnaire survey, but let me tell you one thing. So this is not the complete package. Like questionnaire survey may not give you the entire picture. So it's always a combination of qualitative and, most of the time, combination of qualitative and quantitative research. So especially when you are dealing with water security issues, especially at household level, or intra-household, within a household, whatever. So they're getting only the statistical information, and creating all these tables and regressions. So many times you'll not get the story, the processes that are driving these relationships, right? So in order to understand those, you must be following qualitative methods in parallel. Sometimes we do we do PRA and others, we perform some FGDs and other PRA tools to understand the processes that help us prepare the questionnaire. And sometimes we do the same after the questionnaire survey to understand the particular processes, to explain the particular processes. So questionnaire survey is not the the only thing. So there would be quantitative people who are not in love with qualitative research, but as an interdisciplinary researcher, we should always try to appreciate both, questionnaire survey, quantitative and qualitative research. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the coordinators and moderators. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, with this, we are going to close this in today's sessions. We will be meeting you next Friday at
tomorrow.
Tomorrow at 2. Sorry. I must have mistaken. Yeah, tomorrow, but it will start at 1:45 Nepal time, right?
Yes.
Okay, so 1 hour earlier than today. Okay, then. See you tomorrow, everybody. Thank you, sir, and everybody.
Thank you, sir, so much, everyone. Tomorrow we have a final session. First, we'll have a 2 more session with the 2 resource person. Final will be the more discussion, question, answer, and then assignment. So see you tomorrow at 1:45 Nepali time.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.